Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Tim Gordon, in for Stephanie Domerat. This week we're in Salem, where the legislative long session is underway. Lawmakers have gathered to do Oregon's business, and Democrats are in the driver's seat with supermajorities in both the House and the Senate. But Republicans are still an important part of the legislative landscape and will want to have their say in how money is spent and how the state is run. Can both sides reach across the aisle on even the toughest issues? We will ask two top lawmakers in the Oregon House of Representatives on behalf of the D's and the R's. That includes Republican Christine Drazen, House Minority Leader, a position she's held before. She represents the 51st District in Clackamas County, which includes Canby, Estacada, and Sandy. Drazen joined the legislature in 2019. She left in 22 to run for governor, a race she lost to Tina Kotek. But Drazen is back and leading her party on the House side. We will also hear from Democrat Julie Fahey, Speaker of the House, elected by her colleagues to that position in 2024 after serving as House Majority Leader for 2 years. Fahey was first elected in 2016, representing House District 14, which includes West Eugene and Veneta. As Speaker, Fahey presides over deliberations of the House and wields a fair bit of power, appointing chairs and members to committees where a lot of the work is done. We joined Leader Drazen and Speaker Fahey here at the Capitol for Straight Talk. Well, Leader Drazen, Speaker Fahey, thank you so much for being with us and hosting us here at the Capitol. As we discussed, this isn't going to be a debate, but just a good conversation and discussion of the important issues this session that you're facing in 2025. So thanks again for being here.
Thanks for having us.
You bet. I'm going to start with you, Speaker Fahey, if I could. Not even 2 weeks into this session, what's your take so far on how things are going?
I think so far so good. We've had a relatively calm launch to the session in terms of the issues at the state level, and we're starting to have public hearings and accept public testimony, and so I'm feeling good about where the session is headed.
In a long session, so a long way to go still, too.
Right, 5.5 months.
Leader Drazen, how about you, and what's the most important thing you think you need to accomplish this session?
Yeah, thank you for being here. This session has got to be about the day-to-day challenges that face Oregonians. We have heard from Oregonians leading into this session that they're really concerned about cost of living, they're really concerned about quality of education, their ability to be able to afford their first home. Those issues are shared concerns across the aisle, of course, but ensuring that at the end of this session that we have taken these communities and these families and we have empowered them to be able to feel supported and know that we're fighting for them is really going to be a success for us.
And I'm going to continue with you as well. Now, the governor says a top goal obviously is combating homelessness and creating more affordable housing in the state. It's a huge mountain to climb. What do you see that needs to happen there to actually make more progress?
Yeah, we have got to take the challenge of homelessness seriously, and we've been talking about it for a long time, and we have been making modest progress. But we're at the stage now where if we keep going exactly on the path we've been on, it's going to take 20 years to solve this problem. People cannot afford to wait that long. And so when we look at the challenge of homelessness, we have got to start to look at it like our expectation is that it is rare and temporary, not permanent and chronic. And so the people that are living on our streets, they need to get the help that they need to come into recovery or identify shelter space for them, or they need to not be allowed to continue to live there. And I know there's some complexity there, but if we're really going to have safe streets again, we're going to have this expectation that we're reconnecting people with services and supports, there's got to be some accountability on their side as well. On the housing side, it's important that we look at housing not just simply as publicly funded, state-funded, taxpayer-funded housing, but that we look at it like first-time homebuyer. I have a 25-year-old at my place that doesn't see himself as a first-time homebuyer anytime soon. And certainly we need to change that expectation where the idea is that we do everything we can to lower the regulatory burden and address our land use challenges so that people can afford to buy their first home.
Speaker Fahey, this is such an important issue. I'm going to let you elaborate on this as well. Is the governor on the right track? Are we on the right track?
I think my sense of this issue is we've made some progress, but there's still a lot more work to do. We have, over the last couple of years, the legislature has made some pretty significant investments in homelessness. And importantly, the communities that accepted those resources connected to specific outcomes, to setting goals around how many people are they rehousing, how many shelter beds are they creating, how many evictions are they preventing. And those specific outcomes, I think, are really important. We've we're on track to prevent 3,300 households from, to rapidly rehouse them from the streets by July. That's real progress, and it's important, but it's not enough. And so this session, we have to keep up that momentum, keep up that focus to make sure that we're solving this challenge.
And in terms of housing?
Housing, I'm a former chair of the Housing Committee, so I could talk housing policy all day long, but we have to build more housing in this state. It is one of the biggest challenges facing our state right now. The lack of housing, we're over 100,000 homes short, and that is driving up the cost of housing and exacerbating our homelessness crisis. And it's making it more challenging for workers to live where their jobs are. And so we have been laser focused on this for the last few years. Policy changes, investments in affordable housing, making sure that we're cutting red tape and that folks can build more. And we have to continue that work this session, and we will do that specifically focused on middle housing, making sure we can build more duplexes, triplexes, condos, and continuing those investments in affordable housing.
Thank you, and I'll continue with you now, because many people who are experiencing homelessness also struggle with substance use disorder. Lawmakers last year passed a bill to recriminalize possession of small amounts of hard drugs. Do you feel like that's having the intended impact, and what else would you like to see done to address the high rates of drug use in some parts of the state?
Yeah, I think there's multiple pathways there. One is prevention. We need to be focused on making sure, especially among young people, that we are investing in programs that actually work in terms of preventing drug abuse. And then treatment is another piece of it. So in the 2021 session, the legislature made a big investment, took a big swing at behavioral health care. We said we're going to build more beds and we're going to expand our workforce so that when you need access to treatment, it will be there. And those beds, that takes time for those resources to come in the communities. And those beds are starting to open, and we're starting to see expanded capacity. So that's a really good sign. And then, in the bill that we passed last year that recriminalized small amounts of, possessing small amounts of drugs, that was about wanting to make sure that people had a connection to treatment. Some people are, when they are ready for treatment, there is a bed available and they will enter on their own. Others may need an interaction with law enforcement to get them on that right path. So it was really about creating different pathways to access treatment.
Leader Drazen, what do you have to say about this as well? What more needs to be done?
It's really interesting to listen to a little bit. I wasn't here for the last session, and I know that was a robust conversation around what could be done around Measure 110. I always supported a full repeal of Measure 110, and the reason was this. I really felt like it was the wrong mindset to build a program on. The mindset was that drugs are neutral, and drugs aren't neutral. Fentanyl is killing our kids, and that measure in particular didn't have nothing in it. The measure that they passed in the last legislative session did nothing to carve out the impacts on our students and our kids, didn't protect them uniquely in our schools. And instead, it left them continually exposed to overdoses. And I don't think it does enough. I think we have a lot more work to do specifically around our students. Our own in the state of Oregon, our definition of recovery, our definition doesn't even include staying clean as a state, our goal. What does it mean to address addiction in our state? There is no set standard that includes staying sober, staying clean. I think that really reveals some of the challenges we face as a state right now and why addiction is so prevalent across our state. Fentanyl is an absolute nightmare across our streets and across our state right now, and we have to do absolutely everything in our power to ensure that our students are safe and that we get those drugs off of our streets.
I'm going to switch gears now to transportation. This is something we expected might be a big issue for legislators to take on this session. The governor didn't put as much to make it a hallmark situation, but we'll hear from you about this. In fact, ODOT's looking at a more than $300 million budget shortfall for the next 2 years, citing, among other things, declining revenue from Oregon's fuel tax. What are your priorities for a new transportation package, and what would that include in terms of financing? Would it include increased fuel taxes or registration fees? And I'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you for that. We need our roads to work for Oregonians. We need to deliver goods and services and people across our state. Our economy runs on our highway system. It is a critical piece of our infrastructure. And having said that, I need the agency to be trustworthy. In 2017, they had over $5 billion in new taxes. Only 20% of the projects that they committed to with those dollars have actually been completed. I find that to be shocking and, frankly, not a good bet for Oregonians. So not only can Oregonians right now not afford to have their cost of living increased, but we have an agency that, from my perspective, has not performed the last time it came forward and said, trust us, we'll do these projects, we see the challenges. That's not how this thing is played out. And we've got a governor now that has adopted policies that have increased costs, potentially increased costs for our transportation projects by 10 to 20%, and we couldn't afford the original budget numbers. And so I struggle right now with this transportation issue because we need it. It's the right thing to do. Our economy requires it. We have an agency that didn't perform, and we have a governor that's not prioritizing it. So we are in a tricky spot right now.
Speaker Fahey, is ODOT accountable enough, and what do you think needs to happen?
I mean, I agree with Leader Drazen that we need to make sure that our roads and bridges are safe and reliable for Oregonians to get around and for our businesses to work. And so the way that we have historically funded our transportation system, like most other states, is that people who use the system, if you have a car that drives on the road, you pay the gas tax, you pay registration fees. If you're a trucking company, you pay fees based on how heavy your trucks are and how far you drive. That, historically, those fees have been able to fund the basic operations, maintenance, and safety of our system. But over the last few years, every state is facing this challenge where the resources are no longer keeping up because electric vehicles, you don't pay the gas tax, increasingly fuel-efficient vehicles. So that's the challenge we're facing this session, is how do we make sure that we have enough resources to maintain our system, to maintain what we've got? And so we'll be having a robust conversation about that, and we'll talk about funding streams, we'll talk about what do we think that revenue should be spent on, and then importantly, the third leg of the stool is accountability. How can we make sure that those resources are being spent effectively, and we hold the agency accountable for that?
Okay, thank you for your answers for this segment. We're out of time for this segment, but when we come back, we'll dive into the unfolding dynamic between state lawmakers and the new Trump administration, particularly when it comes to Oregon's sanctuary state status. We're going to look into all that coming up right after the break. Welcome back to Straight Talk, and we're continuing our conversation with the Republican leader, Christine Drazen, and House Speaker Julie Fahey. Thanks again for being with us here at the state capitol. We're so glad to be with you. We're going to dig into a little bit more on this year's long legislative session. We're going to move to education now. Okay, and many school districts are really looking at large budget shortfalls and have been telling parents to push state lawmakers like you for more money. Leader Drazen, typically lawmakers set the budget for public schools after the May state revenue forecast, but with education funding commanding nearly 30% of the last budget cycle, has your caucus assessed any areas where funding can be reallocated, where you can pull money from somewhere else to help out the education system here in Oregon?
Yeah, it's interesting. We just also received our national test scores for all of our schools across Oregon. And as schools have received more money year after year after year, we haven't seen the results in the classroom in outcomes for students themselves. And when we have 40% of our fourth graders that are below grade level for reading, over 30% of our fourth graders that are below grade level for math, I might actually flipped those. But we're talking about kids by far too large of numbers that aren't actually getting down those basic skills. And so inside our classroom, we've got these teachers that are doing their absolute best to try to make sure our students get what they need and are learning, but the numbers show that it is not getting the job done. And so year after year, we have conversations about budgets, which are appropriate conversations to have. But I would also like to have this conversation where we say, what about the kid? What about the family? What about the student? And are they getting their money's worth? We're paying an awful lot for public education in the state of Oregon. It's a constitutional duty of ours. And we need strong public schools in the state of Oregon. At the same time, we cannot just turn a blind eye and say, what do you need to continue the status quo? The status quo is not working. In far too many categories, the status quo in Oregon isn't working. And when I've heard from my schools, in my district in particular, and I don't know if this is across the state, if other legislators are hearing similar issues, They are concerned about these current budget numbers, and they also point to challenges and concerns around their duties and obligations for PERS rates and how that will reduce their available dollars into the classroom. And so this is not a strictly budget question, and I really, really want to encourage the media and families and everybody else that's watching and thinking about these issues to recognize the point of spending state dollars is to achieve a public goal. And the goal here is for our students to be prepared for their future. And if our schools and our classrooms are not achieving that, we cannot write a blank check and just say, tell me what you need. We need to have an expectation that we've had the kind of conversation where we're trying new things, where we're innovating, and where our expectations are that there will be accountability and that those kids that aren't getting help today, that they will have access to new interventions or tutoring or summer school or whatever's required. The system needs to conform to the needs of the students and not the other way around.
And you mentioned that report, the proficiency levels for math and English, pretty disappointing. It just seems like Oregon students have not been able to come up since the pandemic and get back on track. It's sad to see. But education is a key part of the governor's plans for this next biennium. What do you say about what needs to happen here?
Yeah, I think teachers are doing great work in the classrooms all around the state, but you're right. Our outcomes are not where they need to be for our students. And part of that is funding. I think one of our most important responsibilities as a legislature is to make sure our schools have adequate funding. But I agree with Leader Drazen, we can't stop there. We have to make sure that those resources are being spent on the things that we know make a difference for kids. And so in the last few years, we have, at a state level, we have shifted a little bit in terms of our approach. We've done more directed spending, saying we want our school districts to spend money on these specific things that we know work. Career and technical education. We have dedicated resources for career and technical education, and with that money, we've seen our graduation rates rise. 2 years ago, the legislature put forth substantial amounts of resources for summer learning and for early literacy work, the things that we know will make a difference more longer term and will help kids get caught up. It'll take a little bit of time for those resources to move the needle, but I fully expect that they will. And we need to see better outcomes out of our schools. And we will take up legislation this session around making sure that the lowest performing school districts in the state have the support and the resources they need to do better.
What do you say to these districts that say we just don't have enough, we do need more funding?
I think it's a challenge for sure. Oregon is at about the middle of the pack when it comes to funding our schools, but we're seeing outcomes that are not in the middle of the pack. They're below the middle of the pack, and so we need to figure out. It's a resources question for sure, but it's also about how are we spending those resources in an effective way that make the most difference for kids.
Well, now we need to talk about the Trump administration, and I'll be wanting to hear from both of you on this. Oregon's been a sanctuary state since 1987, the first in the country to do that. President Trump has specifically targeted sanctuary states like Oregon with a Justice Department memo saying state and city officials as well who resist or obstruct immigration enforcement could be charged under federal law. Leader Drazen, historically you have voted against strengthening the sanctuary state law, and 2 Senate bills have been introduced this session aimed at rolling back some of those protection Senate bills 11 and 486. If those bills make their way to the House, could you speak to how your party will vote on that?
Yeah, I can tell you that I believe really strongly in the rule of law, and that when it comes to standing up for our state and federal constitution, I feel very strongly that as a legislator that Oregon is a member of this United States of America, and that we should not shy away from working with our federal partners when it comes to addressing folks that have committed crimes. And so right now, we take a look at what's happening at a federal level, and the focus is on ensuring that our nation is safer and that people that have committed crimes are returned to their home countries. And I think that would in fact help our state long term to ensure that we have safer streets. We also have the Trump administration this week in particular, we were just talking about education, And he has announced an executive order around school choice and opening up opportunities for states across the nation to be able to explore ideas that support students. You know, we were just talking about the funding crunch that we're in. In my district, we have schools that have reduced populations by 10% or more. So we have shrinking populations in our public schools and real challenges with outcomes. I think there's a very real opportunity to be able to expand and explore this conversation about what else we can do for students, specifically around school choice.
Okay, thank you. We're going to get back to this issue, though, with the president, a new administration in place. Speaker Fahey, you said your party will stand firm on keeping these protections. How does President Trump's orders factor into that decision, and what do you see happening here?
I think what we've seen over the last week and a half is really just a huge amount of chaos and confusion coming out of the new Republican administration. And that's been really challenging. It's been challenging for us at the state level to track all of that, and I'm sure for people who are watching at home too. And I think it's caused a lot of anxiety. There have been orders issued and rescinded, and memos that have been, programs that have potentially had their funding cut. It's been a big challenge. And so what I see here is, we are ready at the state level to defend our values as a state and to make sure that we're protecting people's basic constitutional rights and freedoms. I'm glad to see that the Attorney General Rayfield, has challenged some of the orders in court, especially birthright citizenship. That was a blatantly unconstitutional order, and so a stay has been put on that. We're ready to defend our values here and to defend the programs that Oregonians rely on. And I do feel very strongly that we can't let that chaos at the federal level distract us from all of the work we need to do at the state level too, on schools and transportation and housing and homelessness and all of those other things that we've talked about. We have a pretty big agenda this session, and we need to get that work done as well.
Certainly do. Well, I think we have just about a minute left. I got one more for you I want to ask, and I'll start with you, Leader Drazen, if I could. It's a chance to compliment the other side here. Tell me something that's positive that you see happening across the aisle.
Yeah. It's been just so fun to get to know the new members that are serving the legislature right now. And I have had the opportunity to be able to sit down and introduce myself and meet people that have been elected since I left the legislative process. And I have found that there is a real openness to getting to know each other, with the opportunity to try to identify ways for us to work together. I certainly recognize that as the House Republican leader in the state of Oregon, that there might be, some expectation that we don't share the same values and goals in kind of the core Oregon views of things. But the reality is that our constituents, they care about cost of living, and that's true for people that live in Portland too.
Thank you very much. And Speaker Fahey, the same thing.
Yeah.
Compliment the other side.
Absolutely. I think in contrast to what we've been seeing out of DC in the last few years, we have legislators in Oregon in both parties that are very serious about getting the work done. Whether it's, the future of water in this state, or housing supply, or healthcare, prescription drug prices. We have legislators on each of those issues, Democrat and Republican, that are sitting down and trying to work out solutions. And that I find very heartening, that people are willing to do the work. It's not just about political posturing. And so I'm really excited to see what comes of that work this session.
Great. Well, thank you so much for speaking with us and for speaking to Oregonians about the issues this long session that you're involved in right now. Speaker Julie Fahey and Leader Christine Drazen, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Again, our thanks to Leader Drazen and Speaker Fahey for taking the time to sit down with us. Next week on Straight Talk, we'll be talking with experts to take a magnifying glass to the uptick in strike activity, both here in the Pacific Northwest and nationwide. Stephanie Domerat will be back as your host for that episode. And a reminder, you can stream Straight Talk on your own schedule. Download the free KGW Plus app, available now on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. You can also listen anywhere you get your podcasts. We will see you next time on Straight Talk. Until then, thanks for watching and take care of yourself.